So let's start with what is the reset and why do we do this? And the reset, to summarize it very easily and put it into simple terms, is a process that we go through to get a team member back on track to success. There's a lot of reasons that team members can get off track. And the number one thing we have to do, the very first thing, is actually to go through and identify how did it happen and what is wrong. And many of you have probably hired and had a failed hire where somebody has left the business. Many of you may have been a failed hire in somebody else's organization, right? It means that somehow you just got off track and you weren't jiving with the company and what your role needed to be. And for one reason or another, you left, right? People leave jobs all the time because they just feel disalignment with what they need to be doing. And we have people all the time in our organizations who just slowly get off track 1% at a time until next thing you look up and you look at them, you go, they're terrible at their job. And they're not getting anything done that I actually need them to get done. They're not fulfilling the expectations that I have of them. And so that's where the reset comes into play. We use a term called the PIP with Keller Williams that you'll probably all be very familiar with. And the PIP stands for Performance Improvement Plan. And performance improvement plans are great and they have their place in this conversation today. The reset is actually kind of what we want to do prior to putting somebody on a PIP. I was on a conversation with Nancy Chu, one of our faculty members earlier, and she said, they're off track and it's not quite that I want to put them on a PIP. That feels very abrupt. Is the reset the right answer? Yes, the reset is likely the right answer in that situation. So keep in mind, if they're off track 1% or they're off track 80%, the reset is the process that we will go through to decipher what the next step is. So what does this actually look like? Well, step one, and you'll see this on your PDF as well, is first, we need to identify what the issue actually is. Where is the team member not meeting the expectations of the job against their job description and against their agreed upon goals? Well, notice on there that it says agreed upon goals. This is actually very important. And the reason why this is important is because frequently we have ideas or goals in our heads as the leaders or managers in these businesses or as the rainmakers, and we fail to convey those clearly. We do it all the time. All the time. I do it at least once a day because in my head, I have a very vivid 360 full color spectrum picture of what my expectation is. If I say, picture a blue car right now, I can almost guarantee that all 28 of you have pictured a very different blue car, right? Yet you're all very vividly picturing a blue car. That's because the expectation of a blue car in your head and the expectation of that blue car in my head are different. And we frequently, like I do mean truly every day, fail to convey our expectations clearly. And so when we identify the issues, the actual job description and the agreed upon goals matter because agreed upon goals help us actually have clarity that we're both having the same conversation. We're both talking about the same blue car at that standpoint. So first, identify the issue. What is actually wrong? There's a couple of places to look here for this. If we're having issues and we aren't getting what we want out of somebody and we say, okay, well, I've got to identify the issue. What's actually happening here? This could be a culture thing, right? They might be out of culture for what you want in your business. This could actually be performance against the standard and the actual job performance there. And this could simply be something like the attire that they wear to the business. So you've got to discover what actually is out of alignment. And the second thing that you need to look at there is the smoke versus the fire, or as I would like to call it, the symptom versus the actual problem. We use the term smoke versus fire because frequently we can see the smoke, but we don't always see the fire. It means you know there's a problem there. Well, what happens if we actually go through and we solve the smoke? Well, we're only getting rid of the symptom. We're not necessarily getting to the root of the problem. And that's why this identifying the issue standpoint takes a little bit of time. And I'm going to encourage you not to make rush judgments on identifying the issue and making sure you get to the root of it. If somebody is not getting appointments set, let's look at an agent example. Okay. They're not getting their contracts. You might just say, well, they're not doing their work. They're not lead generating. Well, that might not be it. This person might be hitting the phones 4 hours a day. If they're hitting the phones 4 hours a day and they're still getting no appointments and they're not hitting their contract goal, is the actual issue the activity? No, it's actually the skill set. But frequently we default to, well, they're not doing their lead gen. But the issue with this person who's hitting the phones 4 hours a day, the problem could be they're calling the wrong type of people. A problem could be their conversations, right? What are they actually saying when they get on the phone? It's their conversion ability at that point, right? So these are different things. This is what I mean when we look at symptom and then we actually look at the problem. So step one is actually identify the issue. Step two, hiring. This is the first of the three questions that I would ask you. Anytime we have a failed hire, and failed means that either they left and it wasn't working out, or you asked them to leave and it wasn't working out. Keep that in mind. Anytime we have a failed hire, we ask ourselves three questions. Question number one is, did I absolutely hire the right person for the job? And so looking back at the job description, did I source and hire the right person for the role that I wanted? Did I actually get the right person for the right role? Here's the thing. A lot of times, this is where you're going to be where you discover your problem. We frequently actually hire the wrong person. So we either hired for the wrong role or we hired the wrong person for the right role. 90% of the time, your process will stop here. Because if you're truly being honest with yourself, we usually are either hiring for the wrong role or we hire the wrong person or the right person for the wrong role. How does that look? Let's imagine you're currently a single agent and you're about to make your first hire. The MREA and what we know tells us that the first right hire is actually an administrative assistant. It's on the operational side, somebody not in production. What I also know is that 50% of the people I see hire the first hire somebody licensed as an agent or a showing assistant, right? So when we look at this and that doesn't work out, we have to ask, well, was it because you hired the wrong person or did you actually hire the wrong role, right? That's where we would look there. So let's imagine you go through this and you're having an honest conversation with yourself and you say, you know what, Liz, I did the autopsy and I looked back at my job description. I looked back at the person that it was, and I'm going to be honest, I hired the right person. Like, I got this one. I hired the right person. I hired the right job. I did everything I was supposed to do and it still didn't work out. Then we're going to move on to the next question. But let's imagine that you're like 90% of the people and you answer no, right? You get this and you go, you know what? I didn't necessarily have the right job description or I didn't necessarily hire the right person. So if you answered no, you said, I didn't get that part right. We stop, we identify that gap where the job description and the hire, and then we proceed to step number 5. But let's imagine, for the sake of our exercise today, you answered yes, I did hire the right person. Then we go to part 3. We look at our onboarding. Did I then do everything possible to set this person up for success with proper expectations, onboarding, and training? Everything possible. Now, we hired the right person and then we brought them into our world. Let's continue with our single agent making their first hire scenario here. When you're a single agent, you make your first hire. As much as you wanted to hire that buyer's agent, you didn't do it. You made the right hire and you hired an administrative assistant. You interviewed dozens of candidates. You got the right job description. You worked with your coach on it. You got the right hire. And then it's time to onboard them. What happens when you're a single agent and you onboard your first admin? Anybody put it in the chat for me? What's your life like when you make your first hire? You're hiring because you're busy, aren't you? And you've done all you can do by yourself. Is it easy to now onboard a 40-hour-a-week person? It's chaos. Michael, that is probably the perfect word I could use to describe that. You enter a world of absolute chaos because now you have 2 full-time jobs. You are a full-time, probably overloaded real estate agent. That's why you needed to hire in the first place. And you are now a leader of this administrative assistant that you have hired. And this person is going to look to you for guidance and they're going to interrupt your day and they are going to need things from you to get trained, right? We can be really good at it for the first few days, maybe even the first week. And then what we see naturally is that something interrupts the schedule and the beautifully laid out plan we had. And our expectations might not have been clear. Our onboarding may have gotten interrupted. Our training may have gotten interrupted. And slowly but surely, the chaos sets in, and our beautifully laid plan of how we're going to onboard this perfect new hire that is going to make our life magical starts going awry. That's natural. It happens. We do need to work with ourselves, with our new hire and our coaches to make sure that everything possible we can possibly do to avoid that is taking place. And I also live in the real world, and I understand how difficult it is to bring on and grow your team by 50%, right? You double in size. That's rough to do. It's hard. So ask yourself, did I do everything possible to set this person up for success and with proper expectations? So one, let's look at the expectations. If you're making your first hire, you may not actually even know quite yet what you need out of that person. While we have job descriptions and we have training and we can help you, every one of you have a unique business and a unique circumstance. And now you're bringing a new body into this world. You may discover things that you never even knew you needed that this person is opening your eyes to. The proper expectations with hires, we do our best possible, but what we also need to do is leave the door open to say, and as we get through this relationship, things may shift and change. I'll tell you, those of you that are making your first hire and those of you that are making your 50th hire, this is the same, right? This applies to everybody. And then we look at onboarding. Did I do everything possible to actually onboard them correctly? And then the last thing is to train them to the expectations and to the role that I had. Again, when we have a failed hire, most of us are going to answer no. I probably didn't set the expectations very clearly. I certainly didn't revisit the expectations on a frequent enough basis during the beginning of the relationship. I might have missed some things in the onboarding standpoint. And you know what? We didn't have the training available at the time. So I'm going to say no, I didn't get that all done. If it's a no, it's time for the reset, right? We've identified what the problems were. We stop, we look at where the gap was. Was it in expectations? Was it in the onboarding and training? What was it? And then we go to step 5. For the sake of argument and training, we're going to pretend that we answer yes to this question. And then we're going to get to our next point, the accountability. Did I then do everything possible to coach them and hold them accountable to it? So following our scenario, imagine we hired the right person with the right job description at the right time. All things were correct. Next step, I set proper expectations. I was on point with my onboarding. I really worked my 30, 60, 90 correctly. I trained them on everything I needed them to do. What we will frequently see happen at that point is somewhere between that 60 and 90 day mark, we released them into the wild. And we failed to hold them then accountable to those things. So the question is, did I then do everything possible to coach them and hold them accountable? Accountability doesn't have to be strict. Coaching does not have to be strict. Coaching is simply bumping them back into the lane and helping them discover what needs to happen next. This does not have to be a wildly structured thing where we meet every single week. Do I encourage you to do that? Yes, absolutely. That's not necessarily how coaching always takes place, though. And that's not necessarily how accountability takes place. Here's an easy way to look at accountability. If you are having an issue with any employee right now, or even a kid, right? This happens in your house too. And they're not doing what you wanted to do and that you agreed on the expectations, what is actually expected of them there. Accountability is you're not holding them accountable when you let it slide. Plain and simple. If your employee is supposed to be in at 9, they show up at 9:05, and you let it slide, they are not accountable. You're not holding them accountable to it. How do you hold them accountable to it? You say, Michael, I noticed that you got in the last 3 days. You've come in at about 9:05, 9:08, 9:10. I just wanted to make sure, is everything okay? That's unlike you to be showing up at that time. They say, yeah, everything's fine. I ran and got a coffee. Great. I appreciate that. It's important that we're here at 9 o'clock. Can I have your commitment that you're going to be here at 9 o'clock? Now, do I care if somebody shows up at 9:01? No, I'm fine. It's not a big deal. I show up at 9:01, 9:02, right? But if it's 9:05, 9:08, 9:10, 9:15, this becomes the slippery slope. And the standard that we accept is the standard that we have. And the accountability issue, why most employees fail, is because us as leaders, we get busy and we fail to hold them accountable. So if we hired the right person, we onboarded them correctly, it's then on us. Did I coach them and hold them accountable? Because the second we see people getting off track, we have the ability to correct it. And if we choose, if we actually see it and we choose not to, that's on us. And that's where this one comes into play. So if you answered no, it's time to move on to the next step, right? And it's time to look at it and go, you know what, Liz, we're finally at step 5. I'm there. I got my first 2, but we're going to go and we're actually going to perform the reset. If you answered yes and you say, nope, I hired the right person for the right role at the right time. I onboarded them correctly. I trained them. I held them accountable. I coached them. Something still didn't work. It's almost a guarantee that you actually missed something in the training, or I'm sorry, in the hiring at this point, in that very first part. So go back to question number 1. Did you hire the right person? What did you miss during that? There's a lot of things that we actually miss in the hiring that end up being problems in our business later on. Unsupportive family members, spouses, parents, things of that nature. That can be a big challenge for us. If we have unsupportive people in our employees' lives and we missed asking the right questions, that's on us. We missed it in the hire. Okay. Other things we frequently miss in the hire. If we skip the life story or we skip the motivational interview out of the career visioning process, we may not see a pattern or a trajectory that is not in our favor. We may go through the life story and have chosen to ignore a lot of victim mentality, right? If you have an interview with somebody and they frequently say, well, there was just no opportunity for me to advance at that company, so I went somewhere else. Well, and then my manager was just holding me back and there was no opportunity to advance. And you hear that 2 or 3 times in a row from their 2 or 3 last jobs. That's not those companies, that's them, right? But we choose to ignore it because we don't want to believe it's them. We want to believe the best of people. So that's another place to look for that. So I'm going to stop my screen share here and we will jump into that PDF. So now let's actually talk about the reset, what actually happens. A lot of the work here is on the front end of it with you actually going through and asking yourselves those questions. That's not a 5-minute exercise. That's an exercise that you're probably going to do over the course of several days. You're going to look for data. You're going to inspect what you expect. You're going to look at track records and trajectories over this person's time employed with you. You'll probably pull out their career visioning file, look at their KPA, look at their life story, look at their motivational interview. You're going to revisit your working relationship with this person and your hiring relationship with this person, right? Did we do everything possible? And so the question comes at that point, do we correct it or do we exit out of the relationship? And this is the challenge that you'll have. And so if you look at number 5, we're going to go with the example of we are going to try to correct this behavior. If we royally screwed this person's career up, like, let's just be honest, you put them in the wrong role, you didn't onboard them correctly, you didn't hold them accountable, you didn't offer them ongoing training, you didn't have a good working relationship because we failed, which by the way is normal. It's not great, but it is normal. It's very common. We owe it to them to try to fix it if we can. Here's the thing. Sometimes people go past the point of no return where the bad habits are too ingrained. They've got culture issues now and they're actually disruptive. They may have larger issues. They may be stealing from us. They may be unethical, right? Those are major issues. That's an immediate exit out of the business. I might have screwed it up from the start, but those are issues we can't recover from. So I want to be clear here. Not every candidate, not everybody is a save on this. You go through the process, and when you get to the actual point of the reset, it's a, do I try to save it or do I not? Let's go with what happens if I want to save it. Again, we owe it to this person to try to fix this. So we schedule a time to talk. This is never a conversation that you want to have on the fly. This is something that should be scheduled, that is time sensitive. If you already have an existing one-on-one scheduled with this person on a weekly basis, that's a perfect time to have it. If you don't have an existing one-on-one scheduled with them in the next 7 days, but you've decided that this is off track and we've got to fix it, go ahead and get something scheduled. Allow yourself 30, maybe 45 minutes. This does not have to be an exhaustingly long conversation. It's short, sweet, to the point, and you're going to revisit it in a couple of days after that. So get something private scheduled. Private means not in a Panera. We're not going to Starbucks. We're not doing this in the glass conference room in the middle of the market center. Private does mean private. Have this as private as you can, because you're about to tell somebody that their performance isn't meeting your expectation. And that doesn't feel good to anybody. Whether it's your fault or theirs, it doesn't matter. Someone hearing that their performance isn't where you expect it to be, they're going to be really upset. Whether they hold it in or not, is only the determining factor. Nobody likes that. And everybody has to hear that at some point in their life. So you schedule that time, you sit them down, just go right into the conversation. I've been looking at your job performance, and there's some areas where we have some room for opportunity. Can I talk to you about what those are? Right? If you know that these are large issues that you have to address, you just go straight for it. If they're light issues, or you think this person may not have an awareness around it, how do you feel you're performing in the job? What are your things you like about it? What are your opportunities that you feel you might have? If they think they're doing the greatest job ever in existence and they'd give themselves 110%, you're going to have your work cut out for you in the next conversation. Frequently, people do feel, though, I feel like I'm struggling here a little bit, and I don't feel like I'm really getting this. This opens the door for you to then go have the conversation. Fantastic. I've noticed that as well. I want to talk about how we got to that point where you're not quite meeting the expectations. Again, if you answered no to questions 1, 2, or 3 on the autopsy of this, it's on you that they're not succeeding. Own that. Tell them that. This is on me. I looked back, and onboarding, I understand that my expectations weren't exactly very clear with you, and the business was moving rapidly. We were very busy. It was incredibly chaotic. I should have been able to do a better job, and I didn't. However, now we're at a point where we've got awareness around that, and I want to go ahead and restart part of that process to help get you back on track to be successful in this role. Here's the next key part, is that you will work together during that to now decipher the plan. Authorship is ownership. And if you just come and you place a plan on the table and you say, these are the things that I need you to do in order to be successful at this, it's probably not going to work, and that person's probably going to exit your business. If you want them to exit your business, but you just didn't want to fire them, that's a great way to do it, because they still have the opportunity to opt in. But if you actually want this person to stay, that's not a really great way to get somebody to stay. Chances are that they will leave. What you do want to have is some ideas and a lightly crafted plan of, here's what I believe we can do to get back on track. What do you see as some ways for us to get back on track here? And let them talk. See what they have to say. What are their thoughts on it? How do they get back on track? What do they need from you in order to do that? You may be able to give them everything they need when they say that, and you may not. If you can't, just be transparent about that. What you need from me in order to succeed there, I'm not sure I can provide, whether that be additional training, time, money, whatever it is. If you don't believe you can provide it, just be transparent on that. I don't believe that I can provide that for you. Do you still believe that you'd be able to succeed in this role without that? And we make the plan. Here's the key things about once you craft the plan. 1, it needs to have a deadline. 2, it needs to have weekly check-in points. If this is a severe case where things are way out of whack, like problematic way out of whack, it's daily. It's every working day. We have a check-in. Check-in's just 5 minutes, doesn't have to be a lot. We're just checking the status on this. Where are we at with the plan? How does it feel? What questions do you have? Do you need anything from me? Do I need anything from you? Very simple. but weekly at minimum. And then we have a deadline on it. At what point do we expect to be back on track entirely? 30 days, 45 days, 60 days? If this is a off-track issue, like let's say, I don't know, maybe dress code, within 2 weeks, that should be fixed. Right? That's pretty simple. Somebody can go get new clothes or simply fix the attire of what they're wearing in 2 weeks. If this is an issue like your contracts are not meeting the minimum standard that we have for our employees, right? For our team members, that's a much harder thing to get back on track because it takes time to lead generate, go on appointments, get contracts under, close them, right? We have a longer time period. So we would be looking at things like leading indicators. Are they doing the activities, right? Are we getting on track for those things? But the key here is you're holding it accountable to whatever the plan is, and you're meeting at least weekly. You decide how long that continues based on the plan, but you're meeting at least weekly. Gene Rivers did a great interview with The One Thing many, many years ago. I think 5 or 6 years ago. It was one of their first episodes. And he was talking about accountability with somebody who wasn't succeeding. And while he didn't go into a plan like this, he said, now I want to be clear with them. This is going to be painful for you and it's going to be painful for me. And this is what we have to do for them to succeed. So keep in mind that this is going to be painful for them because they've established all of these habits, all of these routines, all of these expectations around the way they were currently doing their job. And now we're coming in and we're moving those. It's uncomfortable. It's kind of like if you haven't worked out in 6 months and all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to go do a 60-minute yoga class. Life's going to hurt real bad for a little while trying that, right? You might be able to do it, but it's not going to feel really great. It's the same here. You and this person are going to have to establish new habits, new activities. Carol asked, is this applicable for virtual assistants as well? Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And where somebody is placed in the world, whether it's 3 feet away from you at a desk or if it's 3,000 miles away from you, it doesn't really matter. The expectations on the role, the performance on the role, everything goes the same. Your check-ins might look a little bit different. They would be Zoom instead of in person, right? You'd be sitting them down, not in an office, you'd be sitting them down on a Zoom screen. But yes, it's absolutely the same. And same thing, go back to the job description. Did I hire the right person for the role? Did I even hire the right role? Did I onboard them correctly? Did I then do everything possible to hold them? So what questions do we have on the reset? If you guys got questions, you can feel free to raise your hand or put them in there. A couple more things that I want to note on doing this. This is not disciplinary action. It's important to understand that, and it's important to convey that to somebody. Because when you sit them down and you ask them how they feel they're doing in their role, and then you break it to them that you don't feel that they're succeeding at the highest level, that's, for all intents and purposes, pretty devastating to somebody. It doesn't matter how good they are at other things, that's devastating. Nobody likes to fail. Nobody likes to feel like they're disappointing somebody. So it's important that you help them understand this is a developmental conversation, not disciplinary. You're not in any trouble. But what I want to do is make sure that you're succeeding in your role the best way possible. Maybe that's extra training. Maybe that's just getting extra education. Maybe that's better communication. Maybe that's just a better cadence of accountability between the two of you. It can be the most minute things that just nudges them back that 1 or 2% back into top performance. The more out of whack they are, the more accountable that is and the harder it's going to be. But frequently, things like the reset, they can be 1 to 2% little just bumps back into the lane, and we get them back on track. Many of us had to do this with our entire teams in the last year as the market shifted. Teams were very much used to lead receiving. They were not used to having to act in a certain way with lead generation. Things changed. We had to reset the expectation with the entire team in many teams. So looking at it from that standpoint, just keep in mind that it doesn't have to be a bad thing to do a reset with somebody. So don't be scared of it. And we've got a great interview for those of you that are our KW Talent members. We've got a great interview in our member library with Allison Harris, one of our members, who instituted the reset with a team member who was a buyer's agent who was failing in the role. They put him on a reset and they put him into a new role of a showing agent. The team needed the role, and it was somewhere that he succeeded at a high level. It didn't feel great to give the demotion, as she called it originally, to the buyer's agent, from the buyer's agent to the showing agent. She didn't want to do it. And it worked out great. And he was so happy. He got to that conversation. He said, well, I thought you were going to fire me. We're not going to fire you. We want to see if you succeed in this role. We want to put you somewhere where you succeed. And he did. He thrived. He's great in that role. And I think we're a year later and they're still in that and doing great. Loves it. It's fantastic. It's perfect. They hired him for the wrong role, right? He wasn't good in that role. It put him somewhere where he's succeeding now. The reset will help people be great in their job, and everybody likes to show up and do a good job, truthfully. Marcia, I saw your comment in there. You're going to get this video recording. We're going to send it out to you. So you'll be able to take this video recording and go back through and write anything down on there on the conversations that we're having so that you can use those with your team members as well. And these are also things that we cover heavily as our KW Talent members and frequently in there and what those conversations look like. So for those of you that have been here today, I want to thank you all for joining us while we wrap up our last few minutes. And you will notice there's a few links in the chat for you there. One, that PDF on how to actually go through and do the reset. The most important parts of the reset are the autopsy, which going back and looking at why it's not succeeding, and the accountability after you have the conversation. The conversation is simply a formality that takes place in the middle. Understand that. It is the autopsy of why it went wrong and what is actually happening, the actual problem, not the symptom, but the problem. And then the second part is going to be your accountability of holding to the new standard or expectation or training that you agree upon. The second things you're going to find in there are a link to join our KW Talent community. If these are trainings that you like, these are things that you have issues in your business, we are all about people. We don't talk about selling real estate. We talk about building teams, developing team members, pay structures, coaching conversations with our team members, leadership. This is what we do. We are the place that takes place. And the third thing you will see in there is we have our upcoming advanced workshop. We only run these twice a year in Austin, and it is literally a month away. It is May 2nd and 3rd. We will run it in May, and the next time we will run it will not be till October. These are advanced workshops. They are built for teams. They are not built for solo agents or agents that just have one admin on board. They are meant for teams, and they're uniquely designed because you don't attend alone. You attend with your team members. I use the word advanced workshops because you are going to do a lot of work in them. And the great thing is you leave there with a 100-page workbook that is going to be your guide and your path for the next year, 18 months in your business. So if that's of interest to you, check it out on the links there. You can take a look. You can also feel free to email Angela or I if you would like any more information on that. We actually did a webinar 2 weeks ago, I think, Angela, right? Where we went through and we did a 45-minute session answering all the questions about the Built to Last workshop that's taking place in May. So if you have questions on that, please email Angela or myself. She's putting that email in the chat now, and we will send you that link if you don't have it. And that way you can watch that and ask any further questions you might have. As KW Talent members, you do get 50% off on those workshops. So that is a nice member perk. So if you are looking at those workshops, I would definitely say consider joining the community. I think it'll be the right place. And it just provides all of that ecosystem around the learning that you do there that keeps it going. So you get your implementation and you actually take action. Attending a class without actually taking action and implementing is a waste of your airplane time. It's a waste of your hotel time. It's a waste of your days. Don't do it. It's all about taking the action afterwards. So unfortunately, Marcia, we do not have a way to attend that for Zoom. I wish we could, but because of the way the class is set up, there's just not a way that we have found yet to be able to do something like that via Zoom. But we will let you know if we do come up with something on that. It's very hands-on the way the class is run, and there's a lot of internal instruction and materials. So it's just not currently something that we can run via Zoom. So thank you all for being here. I'll hang on for another minute or two. If you do have any questions, you're welcome to ask, pop in the chat, or raise your hand or come off mute. But we've got a few more minutes that we're here and happy to help.
Liz, the classes, this is Matt Miali in Connecticut.
Matt?
Hi. The class is Built to Last. That's the class.
That's the
And
one taking place May 2nd and 3rd. It's actually, there's a two-part series you'll see on that link there. There's Built to Last and Lead to Last. So Built to Last, this one, is the first one. It's 2 full days in Austin. The second part that you go to afterwards, the second full day session, is called Lead to Last.
and
And
you mentioned that that's like we bring team members to that. Can you give me a little framework for that? Is that like top agent team members? Is that operations staff? Is that leadership? Like who's the right participant?
that's anybody in your team that currently holds a leadership position or
Okay.
that you are currently contemplating putting into a leadership position. So as a rainmaker, your director of operations would be absolutely on that list, a director of sales, a director of marketing, a director of lead gen. If the word director or lead shows up in their title in any capacity, or you have a future vision for that in the next 6 to 12 months, that's somebody that I would highly recommend be there. The class is unique that you can't actually buy a single seat, Matt. Like, so if you wanted to go by yourself, you just can't.
Too bad.
We have had rainmakers that have gone through a recent implosion in their team, and they're like, yeah, that's cool, but I fired everybody in my team because it wasn't working. And my stipulation on that is call your coach and get your coach to come with you. And we actually have a lot of teams that do attend with the coaches that work in the team, which is actually a really cool experience when they do it. It's really, really cool to watch it happen. And so a lot of coaches will attend in that, and that's what we would ask. The reason why is the material is so uniquely designed for it that it's collaborative the entire time. If you go in and you sit there by yourself and you just like, oh, I'm going to go through here, you don't get a lot of the perspective that you have when you're bringing your team members in. And what happens during that, we talk about authorship as ownership. A lot of the problems that have shown up in our teams that we kind of dig into and we uncover, if I go as the rainmaker back to my team and say, I went to this class and all of this stuff is wrong and we're going to change it, 2 things happens. One, they get really upset with me because I probably do that every family reunion, every mega camp, every class I go to. I come back and I'm like, hey guys, here's this big palette full of changes we're going to make. Second thing that happens is they know that you're going to forget because you're going to get busy. And so when they are not part of the decision to do it, they don't have any buy-in to it. And so they aren't going to want to make the changes or back these things. And so we require that they go with you because we want the impact to happen in your business at a high level, frankly.
How much of the content is like, kind of deep dive reboot of team structure versus exercises around giving people the opportunity to reboot and restructure? So one of the things I'd be concerned about, right, is we do a lot of things right. We have a lot of things we do wrong that I'd love, but I don't want to bring them and have them say, oh, wow, they do it this way. Like, which is the other thing that happens at every family reunion and every mega camp. Like, let's throw away everything we do and start over. Like, well, we're not really interested in doing that. We have some room for improvement in certain areas. So how much of the content over 2 days is going to put them into like let's move the whole ship this way instead of that way?
That's actually a really great question that nobody in a year and a half has asked me, Matt. So I am going to
I'm well known for asking really.
Oh no, that's fantastic because I'm going to put that on the FAQ because that's actually a really important part that I probably have failed for a year and a half to explain to people. What's really cool, so you'll like it. It's not here is the absolute model that you do this on. Like it's not this is the way you do your listing presentations. Go that way and do it. It's here's what we identify as frequent problems. We call them fatal flaws in the class. Throughout the whole class, we go through about 25 fatal flaws in the business. And then you go through exercises of discovering what processes and what things are already in place in your business. And then and almost all of them, we go with what's currently working well and where are the opportunities. So the idea is not that I'm going to tell you, hey, I don't care what you're doing it wrong. And you do it this way instead. The idea is, here is what a lot of these best practices of strong teams are, and let's talk about what you have internally in yours. So for example, if we're going through and we're talking about, let's use growth plans as an example. And I say, well, what's the growth plan if I'm the buyer's agent in your team and I want to be the lead buyer's agent? Let's go through and spend 5 minutes just talking about internally, what's the actual process we have on that growth plan so that I know that. And we do a town hall on it. And then you do your own individual with your team on it as well. And then it's okay, let's look at some that are best practices, how this infrastructure works, what that is. And then I hand it back to you and we say, and now you're going to take the next 15 minutes and you're going to fine tune what you currently have. And you're going to start what your plan is going to look like.
That's awesome.
Here's what I'll also tell you on that. I've never had somebody go, we got this one. I don't need to participate in this exercise. But
Yeah.
to your point, the things that people do well, like Ricky Kane attended, Ricky and Cody K attended on the very first one we did. And they were really clear. They're like, we got to a core values exercise and they're like, we're so good at this. They're like, we got this. And even they had found room for improvement, but they polished a very well done structure, right?
I think I would just summarize by saying I'm always reluctant to bring team members to classes that I don't have insight into the content, because we as an industry tend to prescribe without diagnose often.
Yep.
And so we go into a room and it's like, I know what your problem is. It's this, and here's 37 solutions. And then as a team lead, I've now got 37 solutions that are not in priority order, ready to be, distributed or ready to go into full action.
Yep.
And you've created more disruption than solution. But
Yep.
it sounds like a great framework for visiting. Would you call it the fatal flaws, the 25
fatal flaws? And it's
Love
funny
it.
because what you're talking about of those like 27, 37 different things that go on, we have an entire 40-minute section where we talk about how that happens in businesses and what it actually looks like to dismantle some of these duct taped things that somebody on stage, the guru of the week, talked about, and we thought it was a great idea, and we took it as an opportunity for our business, but the reality is it was a hindrance for our business. And then how to assess, we actually go through a model of how do you assess if this is the right opportunity for your business, or if this is something that's really great, but it's really great for somebody else's business and really great for somebody else's model, right? Because like, again, every one of you have a different business and a different model, and it's one size does not fit all in this world. It just doesn't. And we see, I spend a lot of time with teams that are dismantling the duct tape and the toothpicks and all the things of the guru of the week said, hire an ISA. And for some teams, an ISA is fantastic. And for others, an ISA is the absolute wrong choice because that's not how their business is built and everything that is built on. So we actually go through and we talk about that in the session and how to assess those opportunities. And we go through a model of how you work with your team in the future to actually assess, hey, I heard this really cool thing. Is this right for us? Right? To avoid that. Because some of those things might be perfect for you, but I guarantee you not all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Trust me, that's, as a coach, for those of you that don't know me very well, I've been a MAPS coach for 14 years. I've seen it all. I've seen the flyby guru of the week get a system duct taped onto somebody's business. It just doesn't work for them, and that doesn't help. So Matt, to your point, as the coursework was designed, it was intentionally designed to not do that at all, which is what makes it really unique and kind of difficult of why you need the team with you on there as well. And I'll tell you, I asked Gary when we came to the material and I said, here's my fear is that we're going to bring these teams here and somebody's going to quit during the session. Like they're going to realize that this isn't where they want to be, or they're going to quit, or a rainmaker is going to realize that, hey, I got to go home and fire somebody. And of course, in his very Gary way, he responded back and he said, well, then they should thank you that it only cost them $1,000 and a trip to Austin to discover that. That's pretty cheap in the scheme of things. And I laughed, and then I cringed a little inside and said, but what if it actually happens? And here's the reality of it. And we've been running this course for about 1.5 years. Nobody has quit. Nobody has gotten fired. A lot of people have gotten in better alignment as a leadership team. Like some of the stories we hear from our past attendees are just astonishing of how their business and their relationship with their leaders changed after that course. And if you request that link for the session we did, you'll hear from a few of them that attended that and some of those stories. Like we've had directors of sales and directors of operations on teams come back after that class to the Rainmaker and say, my bonus structure doesn't scale long-term. You need to pull back my compensation. It doesn't work. And let's talk about what a structured bonus structure looks like long-term for us to invest in this together. Like when have we ever had an employee come and say, give me a pay cut? And I've got at least 6 stories of that from people who have come through this class because they're looking at the future, not the immediate. And that's what this forces them to do. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. We will drop this link once it processes out from Zoom. We will shoot this out to you in an email. You will have it. We will include the PDF. Thank you so much for being here. If anybody needs anything, please let us know. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next session, or hopefully at May at our workshop. Thank you. Bye-bye.